Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Anti-Doping Podcast, brought to you by the Partnership for Clean Competition. I'm your host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and today I'm excited to be joined by our guest, Dr. Lars Mortsiefer. Listeners, Lars is Legal Director, Chief Legal Officer, and a member of the Executive Board of the National Anti-Doping Agency of Germany, or iNADO Germany. He's also Vice Chair of the Institute of National Anti-Doping Organizations, or iNADO. And in our interview today, we are going to learn more about Lars's career, iNADO Germany, and their anti-doping efforts. So, Lars, welcome to our show today. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me in the show, and quite interesting, and maybe some input in iNADO Germany's work and some thoughts on that.
Fantastic. Well, we're excited to learn more from you today. So, Lars, can you start perhaps by telling us a little bit more about iNADO Germany in general and its mission?
Yeah, iNADO Germany is an anti-doping organization. It's for the anti-doping work in Germany. We were founded in 2002, so we are now celebrating 20 years of our work. And we are responsible for all the testing programs in Germany in and out of competition tests, as well as for prevention. That's the second big pillar of our work. And of course, all other anti-doping purposes like TOEs, legal. So that's my background. And of course, communication and any kind of administration and anti-doping. So we are the placeholder for the World Anti-Doping Agency in Germany.
Fantastic. So you mentioned your background is legal, of course. Can you start by describing your role at iNADO Germany and some of the responsibilities that you have there?
Yes, I started in 2008 as a legal advisor at iNADO Germany. So after 6 or 7 years of iNADO Germany, so we're very small at that point, only 6 or 7 members at the office. Now we are 45. And I started right at the time where we implemented the World Anti-Doping Code 2009. So it's over a decade, but it's quite the same right now. I'm responsible for the legal matters. So for the results management on the one hand, but also any other legal stuff. Data protection is one of my key topics since 2015. And since 2011, I got another job here at iNADO Germany. I was elected as part of the executive board. We have a change in our structure in 2010, 2011. We got some full-time CEOs for the executive board. So I, together with Andrea Gottsmann, she's the director of iNADO Germany and the director general. And together since 2011, try to write the anti-doping purposes here at iNADO Germany.
Interesting. So what is the role of the executive board there?
We are running the daily business, Andrea and me. So we have both different backgrounds. So I'm the legal background and Andrea is the scientific background. She was over 20 years at the laboratory, the water accredited laboratory in Cologne. So we try to deal with every topics here at the office and on. And we have also the supervisory board where we have to provide information to, but we, Andrea and I, we are running the agency.
Fantastic. And you sort of touched on a little bit of the organization's history, but to remind our listeners, when was iNADO Germany founded? And can you just summarize some of these big changes or evolutions in the organization over time?
At least 3 years after WADA was founded. So in 2002, 2003, Germany tried to echo the system of the World Anti-Doping Agency, like a non-profit organization based on private law. We should be financed on a stakeholder principle or with different stakeholders coming from sports, politics, and social environment. So that was the intent and the main goal. As I said, we started with only 5 or 6 people in 2002, 2003. Now we are 45 people. So we have grown intensively over the last years, but it was also very needed for our purposes because we got the main focus on implementing a testing system in Germany. And now we have a system with over 16,000 in and out of competition tests a year with a budget of 10 million per year. So it has been increased extensively over the years. And that's in a nutshell the situation in Germany in 2022.
Excellent. And I know in addition to this major growth, iNADO Germany also instituted some major changes in 2015. So can you tell me and our listeners more about these changes and why they had to happen?
Yeah, especially in 2015, we tried to move on to interpret the targets and the goals of the World Anti-Doping Code, especially to whistleblower protection and the intelligence investigations coming up with the code based on the big scandal in doping in Russia. We try to be one of the first to implement a whistleblower system to reach whistleblowers and tip-offs in a very professional way. and to bring that point of anti-doping work on a higher level. And so that was a major change in 2015. We have the same with our anti-doping law. In 2015, we reached the level that doping is a crime in Germany, especially for athlete support personnel, but also for athletes, for high level and high profile athletes who are doping. That's our major changes in 2015.
Definitely. And I'd like to explore this whistleblower system. Can you tell me and our listeners a little bit about how it was different or what made it effective?
Yeah, so we get in exchange with different entities, especially law enforcement agencies, police, to get more knowledge, because we are not policemen. No one has the traineeship or knowledge on how to deal with whistleblowers and do it strategically or in an administrative way. So we try to speak or try to get knowledge from them. And that brings us to the idea to implement a complete, independent and anonymous tip-off system. So where you can bring in your tip-offs and you feel safe and secure as a whistleblower on the one hand, but on the other hand, from another perspective, you are able to ask questions, to get in contact. And that is based on a web-based version, but it's absolutely data and IT secure system. You cannot track it back to where it's coming from. And that brings us in a situation that if there is a whistleblower, it's going to bring in information. It can be quite sure and safe that this information only gets to 2 or 3 people in our house. And we try to deal with them directly and get back to the whistleblower. And that makes us quite successful. Since 2015, 2016, we reached more than 15,000 people who reached that website. And we get over 230 concrete tips, which we can use for target testing, for exchange with public prosecutors. And it was quite successful. You know, the percentage of the anti-doping rule violations a year, that's up to 0 point whatever. And we can increase that since 2016 to 5 to 6 or at least 10% per year, only by getting this tip-offs, trying to do some target testing. So that is quite successful for us, especially in the work with the public prosecutors and target testing.
Oh, very interesting, Lars. And you made another comment earlier that one of the other big changes in 2015 was making doping not just a rule violation in sport, but actually making it a crime in Germany. Was this transition difficult to make from a legal perspective?
Yeah. So as I said before, we are a non-profit organization. So we are based on private law. So we, in a relation to a public prosecutor, we are only like an everyday person. So we are not allowed to get any information on any kind of investigations normally. But based on this new law, we get a higher position. We are now in a situation that we directly get in contact with public prosecutors. We are allowed to get access to files. We are able to exchange information with public prosecutors on specific topics related to cases. So yeah, that is a big advantage than before. And it increases the overall approach of anti-doping work, especially on chasing doping and trying to catch the cheaters. So that makes it very effective. And we can thank our politicians in Germany that they have that kind of long breath to implement that law, because it was not easy to implement it through the other ideas of the sports system, because they said, no, sports should sanction athletes and maybe public prosecutor or criminal law should stick to overall or organized crime, but not to athletes. But we said, okay, look at the Armstrong case. We've seen that there's an athlete in the middle of the net and it's going to spread into the sport. So we must be aware of that cases. So we need a strong law to detect doping. And if you see the Operation Aderlass a couple of years ago in Austria, Germany, and all over the world, we're quite right with that. That a strong anti-doping act and anti-doping law is the only key to detect such organized crime.
Absolutely. And in addition to all of these aspects of your job that we talked about, another part of what iNADO Germany does is testing. And I'd love to dive into that as well. So can you share with me and our listeners just the scope of the testing responsibilities that iNADO Germany has there?
Yeah, since we were established, we should have that scope that in and out of competition tests should be our task, but it was quite heavy to implement an, on the one hand, independent and on the other hand, structured system all over the sports, because we have more than 65 or up to 70 different national federations in Germany, Olympic ones, non-Olympics. new creative sports coming up, and we have to put them under one umbrella. And we have to see what's the budget for using out of and competition tests. So it took us at least 10 or 15 years. So in 2016, we are already in the situation that we can conduct all in and out of competition tests, at least in professional level and in a kind of pyramid system down to the recreational and the youth situation where people coming up in the elite level. So that leads us to at least 16,000 samples a year and out of competition to 8,000 athletes in different testing pools. And the scope definitely is to implement a testing system which is professional on the one way, which is able to protect clean athletes and to detect cheaters in the same.
Certainly. And you mentioned 16,000 samples. That's quite a lot per year. Do these mostly get sent to the WADA accredited lab there in Cologne, Germany?
We have 2 WADA-accredited labs in Cologne and in Dresden, so we are quite privileged that we're at least one of the countries which have 2 WADA-accredited labs. We also have collaborations with other labs in Europe, but mostly we put them to Cologne and Croatia.
Fantastic. So I know anti-doping is not something that you can do alone here. You've hinted a couple times throughout our conversation at some of these other people that you pull into the conversations, into the investigations in some cases. So can you just describe a little bit how NADO Germany interacts with whether it's state investigative authorities, sport associations, athletes, and others to ensure clean sport?
Long before we had this initiative to implement the anti-doping law in 2015, we started to establish meetings, joint ventures, talks, and collaborations with law enforcement. We try to keep up a high level because we are of the opinion that we have the knowledge of anti-doping and the public prosecutors and the investigators have the knowledge of how to investigate. So we have a situation created to bring that both together. So since a couple of years, we now implemented 2 main workshops a year for public prosecutors, for law enforcement, police, custom services, custom officers, and we're quite successful that we have 30 or 50 attendants through the workshops. And that brings us in a situation that there's a kind of memory effect of anti-doping purposes. Because if you got a case, it's only 1 a year or 1 in 2 or 3 years, but you have to react and act fast. You have to take into the case and you have to provide some investigation measures, some house surgery or whatever you can do from the police side. But you have to do it quite quickly because we have seen that if we inform or notify an athlete by an anti-doping rule violation, they are try fast to get off that trace. So that is what we try to implement, this kind of memory effect of anti-doping knowledge, together with the WADA accredited labs, together with our prevention education team, to youth methods, to compromise information and knowledge for the public prosecutors in the specific area. So that is what we can do and what we should maintain for the next years as well.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up this important point of speed, because I think unlike other cases for athletes, I think this is especially poignant because they have a limited time where they can be competing in their athletic career. So if cases aren't solved quickly, especially in cases where they might be exonerated, that can have a huge impact on their career. So what are some things that you can do to expedite these cases, or how do you move through them so quickly?
Yeah, that is what we also see. To protect clean athlete is a matter of speed because, as you mentioned, they only have a short career. And if they get cheated by other athletes because they compete in a world championship or at the Olympics and we come across only years later, then it's sometimes too late. We have that kind of model that we can store samples and reanalyze them later. That's a huge and important tool to detect doping anyway. But the length of that process is quite a problem. So we try to move forward with the public prosecutor to detect the criminal structures around, because as you've seen the operation Adelaide, there's a doctor in the middle and he's going to sell and to give up products and the athlete's going to contact these doctors. So that is the way only public prosecutors or law enforcement can detect. That is not a part of anti-doping purposes. We cannot look behind the curtain. We can only ring the bell of the door and the athlete opens or not. And then we have a no-show or we have a test. But if the test has been cheated by the athlete before, we got another result. So that is what we try to see together with public prosecutors. But let me say it quite clear. We do that for the sake of clean athletes because they want us to do so. And that's quite our mission.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And it's really important to remember who all of this is in service of. It's in service of sport. It's in service of the clean athletes. And also, in addition to some of this work with testing and prevention, you're contributing quite a bit to shaping NADO Germany's approach to data protection. So I'd love to chat about that as well. Lars, can you tell us more about some of the important considerations that are involved when it comes to data protection for athletes?
Yeah, data protection is a huge topic. As I said, I started in 2008, 2009. That was one of the topics coming up at that time. I think before 2009, there was no international standard for data protection in the water code. So Germany, especially in Europe, was one of the first countries who was going to take the finger in the wound and said, okay, we need to take care about athletes' data. There are so many sensitive data and medical data in the world's anti-doping system, especially in atoms or at the testing level. So we're dealing with blood and urine samples with sensitive data. So therefore, we try to keep up this topic high. But on the other hand, we've seen that data protection should not be used by athletes to avoid doping tests or sanctions for doping. Therefore, we try to balance it. And therefore, we get in contact with our data protection authorities here. And we've seen that some issues in some fields of anti-doping might be not in line with the data protection task, especially after the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe came across in 2015-16, especially on the publication of sanctions, that they should be sanctioned and they should be published or especially get known to federations and the World Anti-Doping Agency, but not to everyone if there is no need to. So that is a thing we're struggling around since years right now. And we are not at the end at all, but we've seen that this is an important topic, especially to safeguard athletes' rights, but on the other hand, to see and to strengthen up a good anti-doping system.
Absolutely. So are there any unique things that NADO Germany does specifically to ensure protection of data for athletes?
Yeah, especially we have implemented the situation that sanctions not automatically get published on our website. We have the database since a couple of years ago, but we are not allowed to use it in a free way. So we're now talking to the public offices if we can use it in another way. So we're not at the end right now. We have that kind of doping control situation for minors that we try to do a more secure environment for minors, especially at the field of a urine sample collection. And then we try to listen to athletes and see how they feel and how there is their behavior on the anti-doping system, especially in the field of the doping control, urine and blood samples.
Well, Lars, I think as you talk about all these different aspects of your work, you can feel the passion coming through here. And I'm curious, how did you originally become interested in this work in anti-doping?
My legal career starts not only 500 meters from the office here in Bonn. I was quite close connected with my university to the office of NADO Germany in Bonn. And I was quite keen on sports law. That was my profession, criminal law and sports law. That was my favorite task in studying legal here in Bonn and in Cologne. And yeah, then I got some contacts to a trainee working here at NADO Germany and said, okay, we're just looking for some legal advisors because we're growing up. Is it maybe possible for you to apply for, or is it a situation? I said, okay, I never been in contact with anti-doping. I only have a course, and it was a trainee course at the university where professors, I think 2 hours or 2.5 hours, a lecture on anti-doping. So that I put in my mind, I said, okay, it's quite interesting. It's a sports organization right before my door, and I'm quite interested in that. Oh, let me have a look. Let me have a good application. And that was a good interview I have with a former legal director here when we was a lawyer at a big law firm in Frankfurt. And I went to him and we sit there at least 3 or 3.5 hours late at night and talk about everything, but not about doping. We talk about football, tennis, everything in sport. But at the end, the last 5 or 10 minutes, we said, we're quite the same passion for sports and what sports can do. Should we work together for saving that, for trying to bring in our expertise in a legal way to strengthen frameworks, legal regulations to safeguard that patience of sport? And then we both come to the conclusion, okay, we should do. And he gave me the contract and I started at NADO Germany. And that was my passion since the last 11 years right now. And that's the passion right now today. And I love sports. I love the competition on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm quite angry if there's something wrong because of cheating. That's, I think, a good mixture to do anti-doping work.
Absolutely. That strong sense of justice, I think, kicks in, which is great. So, Lars, were you an athlete yourself?
Not on the professional level. I tried to do some football here, and I reached the level of fifth or sixth class here in Germany. So it was a patient, but not really a successful one. But through this teamwork in a team, you see a lot of things. And that is what I've learned from athletes since years, that if you come together in this sport atmosphere, you learn a lot, and you learn a lot of for life, what you can definitely need if you're running an agency or doing some tasks for sports. And I think that was a good basis for joining NADO.
Absolutely, Lars. And you've been working in sport for some time now in the field of anti-doping. So I guess what are some of the biggest anti-doping or sports law challenges that Germany has faced in the past over the years?
Although we are only 20 years and only a relatively young organization, there are so many ups and downs in our situation. We started with the best wishes of the politics and the sports movement, but without any resources. From the first day I was at NADO, there was a fight on how to get the financial background and the financial resources to get into the next year. And there was a huge discourse with the sports movement, with the politics. And we are now, since 2017, 18, we are now very settled because we are more than 95% funded by the government and the public. So that brings us in a very good situation. And it comes to the absolutely right time, because in the pandemic, everyone is going to suffer from the situation to terminate contracts or to lose stuff. And that is the biggest problem in anti-doping. There are so less people with a good knowledge on anti-doping. So if you lose them, you will never find them again. So that was a quite right time that we were settled in a very good way on a financial basis, so we can bring them all through this pandemic. And that was a good situation, but a big challenge as well. And now we're in a situation that's not only anti-doping, but other integrity topics come across. And we are now in a situation to maybe have the challenge to bring in our knowledge since 15, 20 years to other fields on any kind of violence in sports, match fixing, anti-corruption. And these are also topics who can destroy sports and the idea of clean sports in a way. And that is one of the challenges we're now facing, to bring in our expertise, to lead a little bit in that direction that is needed to safeguard sports from other directions.
Absolutely. And I think you're completely right here that some of the techniques, some of the approaches that you use for anti-doping can be relevant for a lot of other issues, both within and outside of sport as well. So I think that's fantastic. And I guess you mentioned some of these issues, some of these challenges have been resolved, Lars. But if you had to pick one, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing right now?
To keep anti-doping in the way before the pandemic was. As I said, 16,000 samples, it was a normal year before the pandemic. Now we are reaching the situation to get in a situation to reach a level that anti-doping tests are maintained on a good level. On the one hand, to keep anti-doping work visualized, that there is especially anti-doping education and prevention teams on the two. And on the other hand, to see, okay, good anti-doping work also works if there's no big case and big scandal. Anti-doping work should be maintained on a regularly basis, like an everyday business, but it is visual, it is there, and everyone can rely on, especially athletes, if they have a question or some needs to share with us. So that is the big challenge right now, to maintain that issue.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to anti-doping, sometimes no news is good news. But if it goes silent, you're absolutely right. It sort of falls out of the public eye and people don't think about it as much. But I think it is so important to keep this in the forefront of people's minds. So when you think about NADO Germany and all of the different aspects of the organization, what does NADO Germany do particularly well, in your opinion?
I think the mixture of knowledge on the one hand and try to use some research, especially with the water accredited labs, but also in legal topics and medical topics. That is a unique one, especially in the speed of how things can get brought to a fit for purpose situation. So I think that makes it very comfortable to, if someone in our team has an idea, you can have a plan very fast and you have some good situations to realize that idea in a very short time frame. And that makes it quite unique to other things, especially if you are founded by public money. Everyone knows that realized projects in the public sector, it can take years to realize that. And that is, I think, a good advantage right now, that we can speed up the process and our team can see that their thoughts, wishes and ideas can come true in a very short time.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. And for the PCC in particular, advancing anti-doping science and bringing these new, especially scientific discoveries into real world use is such an important part of what the PCC does. So how do you incorporate findings from new anti-doping science or research into the work that you're doing there at NADO Germany?
As I said, with the accredited labs, we have a regular exchange always a week or a couple of times in a month to see what are the main topics and where it can go in which direction. So we are quite open for any kind of research. We have some research projects together with different institutions and associations in Germany in sports and anti-doping in particular. But we are quite open to enlarge it. And from my perspective, I try to bring it into iNADO as well to widen up that scope over Germany to Europe to the world and try to connect, because I think that is one of the major aspects of anti-doping, that this kind of experts all over the world should stick together, work together and bring anti-doping forward.
Definitely. I think the collaborative approach is so key because sports are global. If you fix everything in Germany, there's still problems with international competition that you might encounter. So I think having those connections, having those conversations and making sure these advances in anti-doping are kind of getting out to everywhere is really important. And Lars, we've talked about a lot of different things that you're working on, but is there a particular project right now that you are the most excited about?
Yeah, we've used the situation in the lockdown during the pandemic to elaborate a little bit on how we can secure anti-doping testing when you're not allowed to see each other. So we try to use our knowledge coming from the dried blood spot project. Since 2015, we're trying to implement this kind of new methods to get a small portion of blood from the finger prick to use it for analyze the sample as an equivalent to the normal blood sample. And we try to connect that with a remote testing system, that we use a software where athlete and DCO can meet each other on an app. And on the other hand, they get this dried blood spot material and the athlete can do the test on their own, then seal that sample always through the eye-to-eye contact to the DCO and then send it back to us. So we initiated such a project last year with at least of up to 40 athletes who voluntarily contribute to that project. And we are quite successful with that. And we are quite optimistic to bring the outcome of this project to WADA and to WADA standards. And we can see that especially the dry blood spot has been put into the standards of the World Anti-Doping Code, and remote testing will be an opportunity in shortest time as well. So that's quite interesting.
Absolutely. I think this is an important area of innovation because I think it's really challenging for an organization like NADO Germany and the other NADOs and NADAs all over the world to be able to send DCOs and phlebotomists and people all over to all of these different competitions to get these samples. So this virtual approach really has a lot of potential to make a big change. And I guess looking forward, are there particular goals that NADO Germany is working towards maybe within just the next 5 to 10 years, Lars?
Yeah, I think these approaches to use the digital world, beginning with the remote testing, using any kind of digital channel to reach out, and especially for education and prevention to the youth and the young people. You cannot print some brochures for 12 to 13 or 14-year-old children. They will throw it in the paper basket and said, okay, that is not the knowledge I know. So that is a big challenge in the next couple of years. Then we try to bring in our expertise into these integrity topics. We see that the athletes' need of help and advice in different topics of integrity is the most important thing in the next couple of years. I think that will be more obvious than ever before because we are now having challenging times with the pandemic, with wars in Europe and all over the world. And the situation for sports, especially for professional sports, will be harder than any time before. So we try to find our position in that situation, try to be there for athletes, for clean athlete as a good partner for clean sports, but also as a multiplier for good ideas in anti-doping, to strengthen anti-doping, to make it less administrative or bureaucratic, but more to the point that athletes can see on the one hand, they will be safeguarded. And on the other hand, if there are black sheep, they get out of the system very quickly and for a long time. So that must be the main goal for our work in the next couple of years. And I hope we got a team here at NADO Germany and all over the anti-doping organizations to see the main approach.
That's excellent. And I'm really glad to hear that you've got these initiatives to connect with young and early career athletes, because I think getting that anti-doping education in early can have a big impact. So I think that's phenomenal. And we mentioned a couple times throughout our conversation that in addition to your work there at NADO Germany, you're also vice chair of iNADO. So Lars, can you tell us a little bit more about the organization and your responsibilities there?
Yeah, iNADO is one of the major tools to bring expertise from all over the world together and try to connect national anti-doping work together all over the world. Because the World Anti-Doping Agency's main approach is to reach a level playing field all over the world. And therefore, we have seen the need of an institution who brings the knowledge of national anti-doping organizations together. And that is iNADO. And we have the main goal to work together towards excellence. So we try to see these thousands of experts, of anti-doping experts worldwide, to bring them on a level to do the same, to have the same values, and to work in the same direction with clean athletes. And therefore, I try to bring in my knowledge from NADA Germany, not only while we are located only a couple of meters towards the iNADO headquarters, but also to bring in information and knowledge from a very developed and very big anti-doping organization to use that knowledge for others. So I'm quite happy to bring in my knowledge because we have seen that there are so many people from all over the world coming with different aspects, but having the same goal. That is a good starting point, and I hope WADA will use this knowledge of iNADO to create these excellence together with the National Anti-Doping Agency, because 80% of the international out of and in of competition tests come from NADOs. So that is a huge number. And there's a huge knowledge on how to do tests and how to provide education and prevention topics. So I think it's quite important to bring them all together.
Absolutely, because I think every organization, every country is dealing with relatively limited resources. And so being able to share across borders what works well and in a lot of cases what doesn't work well, which is just as important sometimes, can be huge. And I know there's a lot of big problems that remain in anti-doping challenges that the field is continuing to work to solve. So if we took away the barriers that normally hold you back, Lars, is there one problem in anti-doping that you would want to solve most?
I think I see it in a very optimistic or friendly way to see it's a huge challenge. Yes, it is. But these challenges bring us in the situation that what is the main intention? We should use our knowledge to make the anti-doping world a little bit better, but we also have to listen to athletes, to care for athletes, to see what their needs and fears are. And if we do that, we do not really need more money. We only have to listen what their approach is. And if we take it seriously and try to take it into account in our daily work, we can win a lot. And then if we have done our homework in that way, then we can talk about where we may probably need some money to increase our work, maybe in testing or maybe in education and prevention. But first, we should have the basis on listening to the athletes, working together with athletes, seeing their needs and their fears. And then we can talk about where we can spend money and resources in the best way to reach their level.
Absolutely. I think getting this feedback, getting these insights from athletes is so important. Is this something that NADA Germany has been prioritizing in recent years?
Yes, definitely. We try to work close together with Athletes Germany, the new founded organization for athletes in Germany. We were a big supporter from the first minute on, try to bring in athletes in our commissions, in our daily work. As I said, listen to them, listen to their needs. There are some good examples. If you wanted to roll out an education program, especially for national federations, and try to implement persons for anti-doping purposes in every federation, yeah, it's a good idea. And you can spend a lot of money and intentional work on that. But if an athlete said, okay, I do not really know that person, then you failed. So please start with listen to athletes and said, okay, where should I implement such a person? On a regional level, on a national level, or where should I place them? And then it's good invest to do so. But that is what we try to do since a couple of years and in the future as well. And together with Leah Kruger and her team, that's a good starting point.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like there have been some phenomenal progress in NADA Germany over the past 20 years. Congratulations on the 20-year anniversary, of course.
Thank you for this opportunity and for this situation. And if you wanted to learn more about NADA, I can definitely emphasize to go on our website, www.nada.de. We have invented a lot of effort in making it user-friendly as well. We have some podcasts and some applications to use to get it directly on your mobile phone or of any device to get some snapshots of our work, but also get some background information. So it's for everyone. If you have only 1 minute or you want to spend over an hour, you can do so. And I'm quite glad to use that because anti-doping sometimes is a very small field, but it can be very complex. It comes to a scandal. But then it's quite good to know a little bit of background. That's not always quite easy to understand, and always what is in the media is the right one. But if you have some background knowledge, it's quite better to understand. And that's my wish for the audience, that they get some intent of what we have done in NADA Germany and what I'm trying to do with our team here in Germany.
Outstanding. Well, Lars, thank you for sharing those resources. Listeners, definitely check out the NADA Germany website. And Lars, it's been a pleasure to chat with you today. We appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you.
And listeners, wonderful to have you here as well. If you haven't already, it would mean a lot to all of us at the PCC if you could rate our podcast and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And listeners, please note that the Anti-Doping Podcast features a wide variety of clean sport experts, and episodes may include statements and or viewpoints that do not necessarily reflect the views or values of the PCC. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Anti-Doping Podcast.